Chapter 2, 1993. Pawn World was located in a section of Philadelphia called East Falls. It sat at the bottom of a hill next to the Schuylkill River, under the crumbling arches of an old bridge. When I got off the bus and saw it for the first time, my hands started to shake. I was terrified. My stomach growled, sharp and hollow. Hunger always made everything worse. It didn't help that the sun was blaring. Weather forecasters said we'd break heat records that day, and I was wearing a turtleneck to hide what I was carrying. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. Not that I had a choice. I was 17, and I was there to sell 5 thick gold necklaces so I could pay rent and keep my mother and me in our apartment. It was my plan. I always had a plan. That's how I stayed safe. I straightened my back and put on a smile. When I looked happy, people didn't really see me. They saw a well-adjusted girl who wouldn't cause trouble, who wouldn't lie. Those assumptions made it easier to get what I needed. Extra food, a free bus ride, hopefully a good deal at the pawn shop despite the fact that I was a minor. The building was low-slung and concrete. A fence topped with barbed wire ran the perimeter. A security guard sat in a shack at the entrance. If not for the neon sign screaming Pawn World, the place would have passed for a prison. "Can I help you?" the guard asked. His voice was gruff. He wore an old army jacket. He had a beard and a gun on his hip, a .38 Smith & Wesson. It was what most guards carried. I knew that from my lessons with J.D. at his salvage yard. I widened my smile. "I'm here to see Leo," I said. 18 to do business. You got ID?" All I had was my library card. It didn't list my birthday. I handed it over like it was exactly what he needed. The guard stared at it. I knew it wouldn't be enough, but I'd talked myself out of worse. I held on to my grin even as I started to sweat. God, it was hot. My heart pounded. This had to work. I couldn't leave without rent money. "Kid, I'm sorry," he said. The look on his face softened to pity. Pity was what I hated most. Pity was also what made me angry, and anger made me sharper. "My mom sent me," I said. "Fanny, Leo knows her. He knew my grandmother, too. Zleta. Call Leo. Ask if he'll see me."
"Fanny and Zleta?"
The guard sounded surprised. I could tell he knew the names. That could be good or bad. "Yes," I said with all the confidence I could muster. "Call Leo." He picked up the phone and turned his back to me. He twirled the spiral cord between his fingers as he held the handset. I hated that I couldn't hear what he was saying. Soon, a wide, short man came out of the store and headed for us. He looked to be about 40. He wore jeans and a short-sleeve button-down that strained at the center. Brown hair covered his head, the backs of his hands, and poked out from beneath his white undershirt.
"Zelda, I'm Leo,"
the man coming towards me said in a voice deeper than I expected. He shook my hand, and the tension in my shoulders gave just a little because I was getting somewhere. Maybe. I wiped away sweat dripping from my temples. He didn't grin or try to make me more comfortable. He just gestured toward the store and said,
"Come in. It's too hot to stand out here."
I kept my smile in place, nodded, and followed, wishing I knew more about him. My grandmother Zleta had been a bookkeeper. Before she died, she'd taken me all over Philadelphia to meet the people she worked for. Everyone except Leo. She never explained why. I'd filled in the blanks on my own. In books and movies, pawnbrokers were mean people who took advantage of others, lived off of desperation. I assumed he was like that. But he could have been even worse. There was no way of knowing. Not yet. Walking behind him, all I knew for sure was that Zleta had worked for him, and Mama had been pawning things here for years. Leo nodded toward a camera over the door.
"Ben's inside. He'll buzz us in."
There was a click. The door unlocked. We stepped into a narrow vestibule and stopped in front of a second door. This one was glass, thick, stamped bulletproof. A poster above it read, "Smile, you're on camera." Even the signs were reminding me to stay in character, to grin. Another buzz. The door opened. 2 steps and cold air hit me hard along with bright lights. I squinted as a chill crept up my spine. Pawn World was bigger than it looked from the street. It sliced back in a long rectangle. The place smelled like cigarettes and coffee. Above the register hung a collection of placards listing loan terms, interest rates, fees. Everything was spelled out. Nothing was negotiable. Diamonds, coins, gold, and silver blared through glass display cases. The walls were lined with shelves, stacked with paintings, daggers, knickknacks, and guitars. All of it was tagged. All of it was priced. There was nothing sentimental, nor was there a single warm spot or dark shadow. In the far corner, there was a pile of computers, printers, and radios. They looked mid-sorted, like someone had been interrupted. Leo gestured toward a stool near the register.
Sit,
he said. He went behind the counter and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the glass so his eyes were level with mine. He was close enough I could smell coffee on his breath. Whoever had buzzed us in was nowhere in sight. It was just me and Leo. Cameras overhead, glass between us.
What can I do for you, Zelda?
He asked. Okay, so no small talk, straight to business. I held the smile in place. My mom sent me to sell a few things. I kept my voice steady, confident. I wanted to sound like the kind of girl who belonged here and could handle herself. She's sorry she couldn't come herself, I added, doubling down. She's working. Leo studied me. It felt like he wasn't looking at my face. No. He was watching the space between breaths, how I held myself. He was probably taking in my prim pink clothing. He didn't know my mother had chosen it, that it didn't fit with the real me. If I could buy my own clothes, they'd all be black. He let the silence stretch. Could he tell I was lying? Of course, my mother hadn't sent me. I had no idea where she was. She was probably passed out drunk in a bar or in someone's apartment. Finally, he nodded.
Show me what you got.
I had layered the necklaces around my neck, worn the turtleneck to hide them, thinking that was the safest way to transport all that gold despite the heat. I started taking them off. The chains had belonged to my grandmother. She'd left a pile of them as our inheritance, and these 5 were all that was left. She couldn't leave money because she didn't have a bank account. She had come from the Soviet Union to the United States through Canada, walked across the border, and never had a single official American document. She always said she was glad for it, that we could never trust a government or a bank anyway. Only gold. Always gold. And especially never trust a man. I fumbled around with my still shaking hands until I had all the necklaces on the counter. 4 of them meant nothing. They were just gold, good for cash. The 5th was different. My grandmother had worn it every day. I didn't want to sell it, but she'd rather I pay rent than hold on to a keepsake. Leo ran his pudgy fingers over the strands, separating them, testing their weight. They glittered under the lights. He put them all down and looked me in the eye.
Zelda,
he said, calm, level.
Tell me what's really going on. Where's your mom? Why aren't you in school?
We have the day off, I said, without missing a beat. I'd planned for that question. Practiced for it. Teacher's in service. Leo narrowed his eyes. He looked curious, like he was deciding how hard to push.
Can I call your school to confirm?
Sure. My smile didn't falter. He didn't reach for the phone. Instead, he went back to the chains, arranging them into neat, parallel lines, taking his time.
You're tough as nails,
he said finally.
Like Zlata.
It was a compliment and an accusation.
You're almost 18.
Were we back to this, talking about my age? I tried to use one of Baba Zlata's lines. Doesn't matter. Gold is gold, and—
How much do you need?
He said, interrupting. I told him the exact number, what we still owed the landlord. He went quiet again. A coffee pot gurgled behind him. The air conditioner hummed, and I noticed just how still the store was. Pawn World was sealed tight by thick walls that were probably bulletproof like the glass door. They shut out the city. There were no sirens, no voices, just the two of us. Tick, tock. Cold air crawled over my skin. Sweat slid down my spine. Finally, Leo spoke.
I can do that. But you're a little under.
He looked me right in the eye.
It's rent money, right? This month plus the last 2. You're late.
I didn't answer or blink. How did he know? He kept going.
That means your mom paid some of it, or you have something saved, because that number was close, but not enough for a full 3 months.
It took me a second too long to recover. Leo saw it. Had to know it meant he'd caught me off guard.
Of course I know what you pay. That you're always late. I see Fanny enough to know a lot about your situation. She comes to me when she needs cash. Sells another gold chain.
I knew my mother came here. I just hadn't let myself imagine the conversations. How much he'd been watching.
That's not all,
Leo said. He tapped the glass near the gold.
I know these are the last 5 Zelda left you.
That's when I lost the smile. It slipped off before I could stop it.
I sold every one of them to your grandmother, he continued. I kept track of how many your mother sold back. It's not higher math.
Inside me, everything tilted. I liked control, anticipating what could happen, deciding how to respond, keeping myself 1 step ahead. With Leo, I was at least 2 steps behind, not in control of anything. He knew how badly I needed the money. He knew when, he knew why, and he was deciding whether I got to walk out of here with rent or not. So I did the only thing left for me to do. I stayed quiet. I waited, and I dug my nails into my palms, willing myself to look calm.
It's okay, Leo said. I've got you.
What did that mean? My grandmother always said nobody did anything for free or out of the good of their heart, and she'd always been right. What was the price? My head was spinning, and I reminded myself I needed to keep it together. I needed to stay sharp. Even if this was going the right way, we weren't done. I needed to concentrate, and I needed to figure out what was behind his offer. Leo counted out enough Benjamins to cover our past due rent and paused, added another 2 bills. He slid the stack towards me.
Don't forget to pay utilities, he said. Pico cuts people off fast.
The money looked unreal sitting there on the glass. All of it right there. I needed it so badly, and yet I wasn't sure I should take it. Trust him. That's too much. I can't, I said.
Please don't argue, he said. It's going to be okay.
How? That's what I wanted to ask, but wouldn't dare. I'd brought my grandmother's old money belt. It was a small thing that tucked under my pants. I slipped the bills into its pocket, zipped it closed. All right, well, thanks, I said, brightening my smile. This one wasn't entirely fake. I'd pulled it off. Now I just needed to get out of there and regroup. I stepped toward the door.
Zelda, Leo said, hold on. When Zelda died, she left something with me. For you.
I froze. What? I asked. I searched his face. He wasn't giving me anything. No emotions, no hints. What is it?
I can't tell you yet.
Then, as if correcting himself, he added,
I'm supposed to give it to you when you turn 21.
Why? Why you? Why not my mom?
She trusted me, he said.
That was hard to believe. She'd never mentioned it. She'd never even brought me here. Leo continued,
Zelda did my books. I kept her gold in my safe. When she died, I gave it to your mother. What's yours, I hold until you're 21.
I hated the feeling blooming in my chest, the realization that I'd been naive, that I'd misjudged him and this entire situation. I'd thought it was simple when it was more complicated than I could fathom. What else had I missed? It didn't matter, I decided. It couldn't. Why don't you just give it to me now, I said, since I'm here?
No, he said. I'm being straight with you. Now you be straight with me. Where's your mom? I know she doesn't have a job.
She'll be home tonight. It was what I wanted to believe. It might even be true. I leaned back into my fake smile and flashed it at Leo. Then, since I figured he was either bluffing about having something from my grandmother or would never give it to me anyway, I took another step toward the door. It was time to retreat and plan. Okay, thanks, this was great, I said, moving, hustling. Your store is impressive.
Hold on.
Leo came out from behind the counter and handed me 4 of the 5 chains.
Save these, he said,
handing me all but the ones Lutta wore every day.
I'm keeping the one worth the most. Don't let your mom know I gave the others back.
He pressed a 20 into my hand.
And go eat, he said. There's a diner across the street.
I stared at him. This was too much, too easy. Will all this be deducted from whatever you're holding for me? He laughed then, a full-throated chuckle that filled the room.
No, but I'm glad you're thinking that way. Zlata would have said the same thing. She had balls. You have them too.
She did, and I knew exactly what she would tell me to ask next. What do you want in exchange for the help? I said. Leo laughed again, softer this time.
I'm not sure yet, but I'll tell you this. I'll be fair, because I owe Zlata. A long time ago, your grandmother helped me when I needed it most, and I promised I'd get her back. This right here, helping you, this is me keeping my word. But I still might ask you for something later.
Of course you might, I said. I tried not to roll my eyes.
I'll find your mom, he added. I'll bring her home tonight.
Sure. I didn't believe him, and I didn't care. I just needed to get out of here. I took another step towards the exit.
Zelda, what happens next month when rent's due?
I've got it covered. It was my last parting lie. I moved fast through the first door, the second, so focused on getting out that I didn't see there was someone in front of me. I hit something solid, warm, unmoving. I staggered back. Hands caught my arms before I fell. Not gentle, not rough, just fast.
I got you,
the guy who'd caught me said. The first thing I noticed was that he was about my age and had a black eye. Then I looked down at where his hands were gripping my arms and saw his knuckles. They were raw, split. The cuts looked fresher than the black eye. If I had to guess, I'd have said he'd just been in a fight. Kids like that usually scared me. He didn't. It was his eyes that told me he was safe, that kept me there. Dark brown, steady. Beyond the bruise, they carried something heavy. Not anger, something closer to grief. The saddest eyes I'd ever seen. And maybe something I recognized. Sorry, I said.
Are you okay? Are you hurt?
I wasn't. Not even close. And no one ever asked me that. He realized he was still holding me and let go. His hair was long enough to tie back, but he wore it loose, sitting just above his shoulders. He wore ripped black jeans, a tight-fitting frayed t-shirt, and the confidence that comes with being the cool kid he had to be. I imagined he had tons of friends, and a group of girls who drooled over him wherever he went to school. He was the kind of kid who would laugh at my out-of-style pink turtleneck, also that I was dressed that way in that heat.
Shit, did I get blood on you?
He said. He pointed to my arm, to the spot where he'd grabbed me to keep from falling. There was a small stain from his knuckles. It's fine, I said. It occurred to me we both should have been in school.
I'm sorry, he said again. It was my fault.
It wasn't. And he was apologizing to me after he'd kept me from falling? Why wasn't he teasing me yet? Leo was coming. He stopped between the double doors, waiting for one to close so he could open the second. Was he coming for his money? Had he changed his mind?
Ari,
Leo called through the door.
"Give me a second. What the hell happened?"
"I have to go," I said to the boy in front of me. Ari. I started to run. My head was spinning from Leo, from how he knew my mom and had given me so much money, and from Ari, the kid with the sad eyes who caught me on the way out. I twisted my neck to look at him one more time. I expected him to already be gone, to have forgotten me. Instead, he was standing there, watching. Just watching.